Many of the points that I would wish to make have already been made more eloquently than I could by my colleagues, so I will refrain from doing so again. There are 3 points, however, I would like to make. CPSMA has over 20,000 members and we support 2,800 schools. If you take our boards of management and if you take all of the other voluntary boards of management represented here today, it is the single greatest example of social capital in the country next to the GA. It is a quite extraordinary contribution by ordinary citizens which deserves to be recognised and applauded. As well as being General Secretary of the CPSMA, I sit on the Teaching Council in the Investigations Committee and on the Evidence of Character panel. In addition, because I'm in the CPSMA, we receive about 7,500 queries from schools on a broad range of issues from parental complaints to bullying, etc. I therefore have a pretty good handle on the problems in the primary school education sector. However, what always strikes me is not the problems which are minor in comparison to the contribution. It is the fact that the primary school system in Ireland is working very well. It is delivering a high quality education and it has very high levels of parental and student satisfaction. I recently had the pleasure of attending a school prize giving which was presided over by Marty Morrissey, who gave, I think, one of the best definitions of a school I've ever come across. He said a school was a unique community where dedicated professionals helped pupils to discover and develop their talents. I think it's a great definition, but it also has at its core partnership. We cannot outsource the teaching of our children or the education of our children to schools. It is a partnership between parents, schools and students. We certainly welcome the Students' Charter as a codifying of existing best practice. Most schools are already doing this, and it is good to have it set out down on paper in clear black and white. However, we would have a concern with some of the language. For example, it talks about the school being a service provider. Schools are not the educational equivalent of Tesco. They are partnerships, and they only work when parents and teachers work together. We would also have a concern that schools in the primary school sector are suffering from initiative overload. The amount of administration that has been put down in schools is increasing all of the time. Much of this is necessary and valuable, but it does mean that teachers and principals can sometimes be a little bit defensive because they see more work arriving in on top of them. I know it is not the intent of the Student Charter, but we would have a concern that the subtext of the Student Charter is that somehow schools are doing something wrong. We would therefore urge that the Department, in drafting and redrafting this, would be cognizant of the language and would celebrate schools rather than suggesting that they are doing something wrong, which I don't believe is the intent. Finally, rights also have responsibilities. There are a minority, thankfully a very tiny minority of parents, who are not always as grateful or as respectful of the efforts of schools as they might be. It would be very useful to have the responsibilities of parents and the responsibilities of students set out in the Charter so that all stakeholders have a clear idea of their rights and responsibilities. Thank you. Firstly, the issue of resources. It is true that the overall budget for education is 8 billion, but schools are expected to pay for insurance, heating, lighting, cleaning, etc. on 92 cents per pupil per school day. I am always conscious when I stop off and get a cup of coffee and a bun and spend €5 on it that I've just blown the budget for a week for a school student, and we need to be conscious of that. I would therefore strongly resent taking money from frontline resources and putting it into another layer of administration. Secondly, I would have a concern around the advocacy. The real strategic challenge facing the primary school sector is that the pace of change has not just contributed to a major administrative burden, which is now unsustainable for teaching principals. In 1984, if you started, you had a roll book and you had a receipt book. That was the level of administration. Now you have a huge amount more than that. It's increased exponentially. But it's not just that. There has been a period of almost unprecedented change in the Irish education system. a huge raft of legislation, of changing demographics. It's creating a situation where principals are starting to look at it and go, we can't take any more. The reason we have a very good primary school system is the quality and the calibre of the people who work in our schools, who lead our schools, and the commitment of boards of management who have to be arm wrestled basically into becoming onto a board of management. It's their commitment. If we overburden them, we risk breaking the system. We have a plethora of advocates who have loads of things they would like the primary school system to do. We would benefit greatly from a period of masterful inactivity which would allow schools to absorb all of the changes and focus on what is most important, which is teaching.
Just in reference to Deputy Daly's point that we're against an Ombudsman for Education because of a fear factor, that simply is not the case. If we felt that the Office of an Ombudsman for Education would better the education experience for a single child in the country, we would be in support of it. But we feel, as the point has been made here around the table, there are plenty of fora out there for dealing with issues when they arise, and I think bringing all of that together, the resources that we have there now, would be, I think, better for the system as opposed to setting up another office for dealing with issues in education. The cost that Deputy Daly references, we're very sensitive to cost certainly in the primary sector because schools are under-resourced, and I'm glad to hear the deputies and the senators acknowledge that it is a lack of resources in the system and that we need to pump more money in. I'm absolutely delighted with Deputy Nolan's point in relation to middle management. That is a live issue right now, and it would be fantastic if this committee could encourage the Minister to pump the resources into middle management if at all possible, because that's where the money is absolutely needed. I don't know where Deputy Daly, the people that want to get on boards in his constituency who can't get on the boards of management. I think our experience is the same as Senator Gallagher's in that it's very difficult to get people to give of their time and to encourage them to come on boards of management. And also in relation to the suggestion that there's something underhand in relation to how people get on boards of management, that simply has to be corrected. There is a governance manual published by the Department of Education which sets out clear procedures that have to be followed when members are to be elected onto boards of management. The other point, Deputy Martin, in relation to the interview processes and the suggestion that it's all political people or people with political contacts that are getting onto boards of management, I think I have to agree with Michael's point in relation to the fact that boards of management have people from all walks of life on them, and again there are procedures at I'm only speaking from a primary perspective. There are procedures there that are set out and they are based on best practice, and boards of management and selection panels on boards of management have to follow those procedures. As I said, I'm delighted with the points in relation to middle management, and I would strongly urge the committee, if at all possible, if you have any sway with the Minister, to encourage that resources and middle management would be restored to primary schools. Thanks very much.